Today we're going to talk about how to get some great Les Paul neck tones. Hey everyone, I'm Jack Fossett. Welcome to the channel and welcome to this video feature on how to get the most out of the neck pickup of your Les Paul, whether it's a Gibson Les Paul, an Epiphone Les Paul, or any number of other companies that make some variation of this guitar. I get a lot of comments about people struggling to get a good Les Paul neck tone, and you know, you see this with a bunch of different guitars. People kind of favor one pickup over the other. One of the ways you can tell this is by how many different modifications there are out there. Great example of this is the Stratocaster, right? You see a lot of traditional Stratocasters, but you also see a lot of people changing out the bridge pickup to get more snarl. You see in Telecasters, people kind of, I think, as I've done in videos, misunderstand the Telecaster neck tone. So you see a lot of Telecasters with the neck pickup swapped out for other things. The Les Paul is another common one where you see people putting things like humbucker-sized P90s in, or, you know, various other things that you can do there to try and brighten up the neck pickup, which sometimes, if you don't dial it in right, can sound a little too woofy and muddy. Now, obviously, this is not going to apply to everyone. For those of you who already get great Les Paul neck tones, good on you. Go have fun with it. Please, please refrain from the comments of like, how do you get a good Les Paul neck tone? You plug it in. My exceptional sense of humor deserves better. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, when you're talking about getting a good Les Paul neck tone, as we just mentioned, the problem can arise that sometimes it can be a little bit woofy, a little bit muddy, it can lack definition, lack clarity. We'll get into talking about the hardware and the actual makeup of the guitar in a little bit, but there's one simple thing you can do to get a great Les Paul neck tone, which just requires you rethinking your strategy with it. And that is dial in your tone based on your neck pickup and not on your bridge pickup. Because I bet a lot of you who are struggling to get a good Les Paul neck tone will dial in your sound based on this awesome bridge tone that you want. Because a lot of players with a Les Paul just get that crazy rockin' bridge tone from a Les Paul, and then when they flip back, it doesn't really suit the neck sound. A couple of ways that you can rethink this. First of all, I'm a big proponent of lowering your pickups. I like to have pickups set lower than what usually comes stock. Now, the further up, the higher that the pickup is mounted, the more output you're going to get. It makes sense, right? The magnets are closer to the strings. The lower they get, yes, you get lower output, but you tend to get a bit more clarity and definition. So particularly if you're somebody who has an Epiphone Les Paul, I would say lower the pickups because they tend to come with the pickups kind of jacked up pretty high. Start lowering them and just lower them to the point where you think it sounds good. You don't need to drop them way down into the body if you want. I actually kind of tend to do that. I drop them down really far and I love the tones that I get that way, but play around with it. Get a screwdriver, have your, guitar plugged in, lower it a bit, play some chords, play some notes, see how you like it, lower it more, raise it more, just kind of find the spot that suits what you want to do. But going back, the easiest way is to dial it in, not based on your bridge sound, but based on your neck sound. What this is going to mean is you're going to probably dial in your amp and your effects brighter than you would have otherwise. Now, the problem that can arise there is now your bridge pickup might be a little bit too sharp, a little bit too biting. But there's a very, very simple remedy for that. A traditional Les Paul has a volume and a tone for each pickup. So the way that I tend to dial in my Les Paul is to get a nice, clear, bright neck tone. And then when I'm on the bridge pickup, I keep the tone knob rolled off, sometimes as far back as 5. And with the amp running a little bit brighter, that kind of just sounds like it might if I dialed in my bridge tone, right? You still have a lot of brightness, you still get a lot of that nice crunch, but it cuts off some of that harsh top end. Now, where you're going to set your amplifier up, that's all going to depend on what your amp is and, you know, like what pickups and things you have in your Les Paul, what type of Les Paul do you have. But use this general philosophy. Dial it in based on your neck tone, not on your bridge tone, and then adjust your bridge. You can always back off of treble, but you can't really add it. You know, beyond your tone knob being at 10, you can't get any clearer than that. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with a Les Paul is that the middle pickup can be a lot of various shades of a lot of different things based on how you manipulate your volume and your tone controls. Now, these are tricks that go back all the way back to Jimmy Page, probably even guys before him, and Joe Bonamassa talks a lot about it in getting various tones from your Les Paul. So a great way to get a really nice warm but still articulate, but it kind of rounds out some of the edges, this really nice kind of woody tone, is to put it in the middle position and roll off the volume of your bridge pickup. So what I'm going to do in a minute here is to play some Les Paul tones. Now I'm playing into a Supro Black Magick, and I've got the tone knob turned up higher on that than I would normally for another guitar. And I'm going to show you a little bit of manipulation between the neck pickup and the middle setting with the bridge pickup rolled off. Also going to switch to the bridge pickup so that you can hear how that sounds when its tone is rolled off, so that the two pickups kind of match each other nicely, right? And the other thing that I'm going to do for some of it is to just notch the volume. This is another good thing if you're going to run your amp brighter and you might be worried about like some harsh tones, especially at gig volumes, is just notch your volume a little bit. It doesn't even need to be that much, like down to 9 from 10. And it just tames that edgy top end a little bit, and then if you need it, you can always push it that last bit of the way. So let's hear how this all sounds in practice now. Now, on the subject of other guitars, I do want to mention one of the things to keep in mind is that This is a Les Paul, and it sounds like a Les Paul. Now, you can make the neck pickup sound nice and bright, and I really love the way a Les Paul neck pickup sounds when you dial it in right. But it's important to remember, but this is particularly for beginner and intermediate players when you're kind of getting used to the, different guitar tones and starting to familiarize yourself with it. Let the guitar be what it is and don't necessarily try to make it something else. If you want like a Fender neck tone, which trust me, I understand, I love Fender neck tones, but if you want a Fender neck tone, get a guitar that does that. If you want a Les Paul to sound like a Stratocaster, it's just not really gonna do it. You can kind of get close, but I think, at least personally, it's better to let a guitar be what it is, because each guitar kind of shines doing its own thing. In that sense, how do you define the Les Paul neck tone? Well, I like to think of it in terms of color temperature. This is actually something my keyboard player, Justin, who's a brilliant musician, talks about when he does recording between, like, piano and organ parts and all kinds of other things, is color temperature of tone. Generally speaking, humbuckers give you a warmer sound and single coils give you a cooler sound, right? Cooler and more articulate and brighter versus warmer and darker, which would be like your humbucker. The interesting thing about a Les Paul is when you compare it to other Gibson guitars, it has that humbucker warmth, but in a cooler way comparatively. So if you play like a Les Paul neck pickup versus an ES335 neck pickup, the ES335 neck pickups, it's almost like kind of cuddling up in a big comforter. The Les Paul has a coolness to it, which is really, really neat. Now, the best example of this I've found is actually Mark Knopfler playing a song called Song for Sonny Liston, and he used a vintage, I believe it's his vintage 1958 Les Paul. I'm going to link to that right there. It's a phenomenal song. And he's got this kind of, driven tube amp. And it's just like, in my opinion, one of the perfect representations of the character of a Les Paul neck tone. So I'm going to play a sample of that now. Another great example of Les Paul neck tones, you just got to look to the Allman Brothers, right? The Allman Brothers use the Les Paul neck position an awful lot and just got these beautiful, beautiful, again, warmer than a single coil, but in that realm, cooler than other ones, and it has kind of a nice silkiness to it. And all those tones are inherent in your guitar if you just kind of dial it in right. Now, the last thing is kind of, you tend to lose articulation depending on how much gain you drive. So for the pedals that I'm using today, I'm using a Keeley DDR, which is a phenomenal pedal, and the drive is kind of based on a blues breaker sound. I'm going to stack it with a Boss Blues driver and kick up the gain a little bit, and you'll see the way I have the pedals dialed in and the way that I have the amp dialed in, that it still sounds articulate, even with using a humbucker in the neck position. So let's hear it now with a little bit more drive. Or lastly, if you're really into Les Pauls and you just still don't think it's, kind of bright enough and what you want, I would highly suggest a Les Paul with alternate pickups. And in fact, one of my absolute favorite guitars of all time is the Les Paul Deluxe. I think it's the most underrated Les Pauls that are out there. It's one of the... Words are hard. The Les Paul Deluxe having mini humbuckers just sounds phenomenal, and it really just sounds kind of like exactly halfway between a Les Paul and a Telecaster, is the best way I can describe it. It just sounds phenomenal, particularly the extra articulation and smoothness and coolness that you get on that neck pickup. Now, there's obviously also, there are Les Pauls out there with P90s. You can find Les Pauls that have a P90 in the neck and a humbucker in the bridge. There's all kinds of other things, so there's certainly options out there. But check out how great the neck tone on this Les Paul Deluxe is. All right, to close out, we'll just talk about hardware a little bit, because this is something that, you know, a common thing also, if you're not getting a bright or articulate enough tone out of your pickup, a lot of people just change pickups. There's a couple of things to think about here. Again, first of all, I would try lowering them first. And some people say you shouldn't lower your pickups. I love lowering pickups. I lower them as far as I can, you know, basically do without it looking like it's concave into the body. That's just my personal preference. Again, you lower it to the point where you think it sounds good. And, you know, if you think you've gone too far, raise it a little bit. That's your step one. Step two, I would say, before you go swapping pickups, is to upgrade the wiring. Particularly in a Les Paul with 50 style wiring, it changes the dynamics of the guitar a little bit, and it's almost like adding a bit of clarity to it. Now, capacitors, some people will tell you that this is snake oil, some people won't. I think it makes a difference, but not as significant as some people say that it is. So I'm not going to get into the capacitors right now, but I will say that using 50 style wiring with higher value pots, you really should have 500K pots in a Les Paul. That will actually make a difference in opening up the clarity of your guitar. And that's going to be less invasive and less expensive than swapping out pickups. And I am also a firm proponent of, so I'm not saying don't swap out your pickups, because I swap out pickups in tons of guitars. I love it. It kind of makes the guitar more mine. You know, I can find something that suits my playing and my taste and everything. But my point is don't feel like you need to do that right away. Kind of take it step by step. Lower the pickup, see if you can get them where you sound, you know, dial in your amp based on the neck tone instead. If you're still not happy, maybe you can upgrade the wiring. If you're still not happy, then you can get to pickup. So before you know, just don't kind of put the cart before the horse, or I don't know if that phrase applies, but works in my brain. Now the Les Paul, the Les Paul that you were listening to today had PAF style pickups with 50 style wiring, so that does kind of give me a little bit of a boost in showing off how good the tones can sound in this style. But again, you know, even if you have a cheaper Les Paul that has cheaper wiring, you can still achieve better results if you kind of use this philosophy. So let us know, how do you like to dial in your Les Paul tones? Does all this make sense to you? Is there another way you'd go about it? Please let us know in the comments. I'm Jack Fossett. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.